My grandma snatched the container of baby formula straight out of my hands, her diamonds scratching my wrist as she glared at the government WIC voucher on the counter. "What is the meaning of this, Lily?" she hissed, her voice echoing across the base commissary. "Are you trying to humiliate our family? I ask you, wasn't $200,000 a month enough for you?" I froze, the blood entirely rushing out of my face as the cashier stared at us in absolute shock. I looked at my wealthy, estranged grandmother, then down at my 4-month-old daughter strapped to my chest, and felt a cold wave of horror sink deep into my chest. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice trembling so hard I could barely breathe. "What are you talking about? I've been living on my military salary. I have never received a single cent from you." That was the moment everything changed. Everyone in the grocery aisle turned to look at us. I stood frozen in my digital camouflage uniform, my 4-month-old daughter, Mia, fast asleep against my chest. In my hand, crumpled and shaking, was a government WIC voucher meant to cover the cost of 3 cans of baby formula. "I am Lily. I'm 28 years old, a specialist in the United States Army, and up until 30 seconds ago, I thought my family wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. When I chose a life of service over the family business, they cut me off completely. Or at least, that's what I had been led to believe for the last 2 years. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice completely cracking as the cashier stared awkwardly at the terminal. "I don't know what you're talking about. I survive on my base pay. I have never received a single cent from you." Eleanor's furious expression faltered. The sharp, commanding look she always wore suddenly deteriorated into pure confusion, then into absolute horror. She looked at the government food assistance voucher in my hand, then at my worn boots, realizing with a terrible certainty that I wasn't lying. The matriarch of the wealthiest estate in the county turned completely pale right there in the grocery aisle. Before I tell you how my grandmother uncovered the dark truth behind this mystery, follow my story to the end and comment the city or military base you're watching from so I can see how far my voice has reached. To understand how my grandmother and I ended up staring at each other in total shock in a military commissary, you have to understand the path I chose. Growing up, my parents made it very clear what was expected of me. They wanted a perfect high society daughter who would marry into another wealthy family and help manage the massive family estate. But I wanted something different. I wanted to earn my own way, to serve a purpose bigger than country club luncheons and designer clothing. When I turned 26, I did the unthinkable in my family's eyes. I enlisted in the army. My parents were absolutely furious. They told me I was ruining the family name and essentially disowned me on the spot. For the last 2 years, the silence from them had been deafening. I adjusted to a completely different lifestyle, living in modest base housing and counting every single dollar from my military paycheck. Things became infinitely more complicated when I had my daughter, Mia. Raising a newborn alone on a lower enlisted soldier's salary is a grueling, exhausting reality. Between rent, diapers, and bills, my paycheck vanished the moment it hit my bank account. When the price of baby formula skyrocketed, I swallowed my pride and applied for WIC benefits. I didn't care about my family's elite reputation anymore. I only cared about keeping my baby fed. I thought I was entirely on my own, completely cut off from the millions of dollars my family controlled. I had no idea that a massive lie was being spun behind my back. Eleanor didn't care about the whispers in the commissary. She grabbed my arm, her hand trembling, and practically forced me out to her waiting luxury town car. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a quiet, high-backed booth at a diner just outside the base. Mia was sleeping peacefully in her car seat beside me, entirely unaware of the storm gathering around us. Eleanor sat across from me, her perfect posture rigid with an anger I had never seen in her before. "Lily, look at me," she commanded, her eyes piercing. I need you to tell me the absolute truth. Have you really been living like this? Struggling to buy groceries? Relying on government assistance? Yes, Grandma, I said, a flush of shame heating my cheeks. My specialist pay is barely enough to cover rent and basic necessities. I disowned the family name, remember? You all cut me off when I joined the army. Eleanor let out a sharp, ragged breath. We didn't cut you off. I would never let my granddaughter starve, no matter how foolish I thought your career choices were. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out her phone, logging into a secure bank portal. She spun it around to face me. Look at this. My eyes scanned the screen. It was the registry for the Family Trust Fund, under my name. My heart stopped. Every single month for the past 2 years, a transfer of exactly $200,000 had been authorized and cleared. I set this up the day you finished basic training, Eleanor whispered, her voice cracking. Your parents told me they were managing it for you to keep your military life undisturbed. I thought you were independently wealthy. Lily, where has all this money been going all this time? The silence between us grew heavy, punctuated only by the soft clinking of silverware from the diner's kitchen. I stared at the numbers on the screen, my mind spinning as I tried to reconcile the reality of my bank account, which currently held exactly $43, with the millions of dollars that had supposedly been transferred in my name. I have never seen this account in my life, I whispered, the harsh truth finally settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I don't have a debit card for this, and I've never signed a single transfer authorization. Grandma, if this money was leaving your estate every month, who was actually receiving it? Eleanor didn't answer right away. She tapped the screen, opening the detailed transaction history of the trust. As the records loaded, the dark truth was laid bare in black and white. The monthly $200,000 wasn't going to a military credit union. It was being routed directly into a private holding account owned by my parents, Richard and Evelyn. They told me they were protecting you, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with a dangerous, quiet rage. They claimed you wanted to prove you could survive on your own, but that they were keeping this money in a secure account for your eventual return. They even showed me signed transaction receipts, Lily. Signed by you. I felt a sickening wave of betrayal wash over me. My parents had used my defiance as a perfect cover story. They had painted me as the proud, stubborn soldier who refused family help, all while forging my signature to siphon away a massive fortune. While I was pulling 24-hour guard shifts and calculating if I could afford formula, they were buying yachts, funding lavish country club lifestyles, and laughing at my struggle. Eleanor's hand slammed down onto the diner table, rattling the coffee cups and causing a nearby waitress to jump. The sheer shock on her face had entirely transformed into a cold, lethal fury. She didn't cry, and she didn't waste time throwing a tantrum. Instead, she slid her fingers across her phone screen and hit a speed dial contact marked simply as Preston. Preston, Eleanor said, her voice dropping into a terrifyingly calm professional register. I am sitting with my granddaughter, Lily. It turns out she has never received a single dollar from the trust. None of it. Richard and Evelyn have been forging her signature and embezzling the funds for the last 24 months. There was a brief pause as the man on the other end, her high-powered corporate lead attorney, responded. I could hear the sharp intake of breath through the receiver. I want a full, aggressive forensic audit of that account started within the next 10 minutes, Eleanor commanded, ignoring the lawyer's attempts to calm her down. Freeze every single asset tied to Richard and Evelyn's names, cut off their credit lines, lock their corporate accounts, and revoke their access to the family estate properties. I want them completely paralyzed financially before they even realize we know what they've done. She hung up without saying goodbye and looked across the table at me, her eyes shining with absolute determination. They thought they could use your sacrifice to fund their greed, Lily. They thought they could leave my granddaughter and great-granddaughter in poverty while they played high society. They are about to learn exactly what happens when you steal from this family. The air inside the mahogany-paneled conference room was thick with tension. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, strode in with their usual arrogant smiles, completely oblivious to the trap that had been set for them. They expected a standard family meeting, but their expressions instantly shattered when they saw me sitting at the head of the table in my army uniform, flanked by Grandma Eleanor and 3 of the state's most ruthless corporate defense attorneys. "What is she doing here?" my mother sneered, pointing a manicured finger at me. "And why are our credit cards being declined, Eleanor? This is highly embarrassing." Grandma didn't say a word. She simply nodded to her lead attorney, Preston, who turned his laptop around to show the bright screen. "These are the results of the forensic investigation," Preston announced, his voice clinical and cold. "We have documented 24 months of systematic grand larceny, wire fraud, and embezzlement. We have the digital routing trails showing how you siphoned millions from Lily's trust into your personal shell accounts. More importantly, we have the forensic handwriting analysis proving you forged your daughter's signature on bank authorizations." My father's face drained of all color, going a sickly shade of gray as he looked at the sheer mountain of evidence. My mother clutched her designer purse, her chest heaving as she realized their high society life was collapsing in seconds. "You have 2 choices," Grandma Eleanor said, leaning forward with terrifying finality. "You can sign the transfer line to release your personal assets, your luxury vehicles, and your shares of the family estate to Lily to repay what you stole. Or you can leave this room in handcuffs. The police are waiting downstairs." My parents didn't even hesitate. With hands trembling, they signed the transfer lines to hand over everything they owned to escape a prison cell, leaving the office ruined, humiliated, and completely broke. Grandma Eleanor made sure every single cent of the recovered millions was transferred safely into a protected account solely for Mia and me. I eventually transitioned out of the military to focus on raising my daughter, but I never forgot the struggle of standing in that commissary line. Today, I use a portion of those funds to run a foundation that provides emergency grants and formula to young military families facing financial hardships across the country. What would you do if you discovered your own parents had stolen millions meant for your child? Comment below, and check out the 2 videos on your screen right now for more incredible stories. Thank you so much for watching until the very end of my journey.